My father betrayed me after 12 years building his real estate empire. He chose my two-year-old nephew as CEO instead. So I quit, started my own company, and stole 40% of his clients. Now he's bankrupt and begging me to come back. I'm 34 years old, I work in real estate, and what happened 2 years ago basically destroyed any relationship I had with my family. But at the same time, it was the best thing that could have happened to me, even though it sounds weird to say it like that. The thing is, I dedicated 12 years of my life, literally 12 complete years, to building my father's company. And all that effort, all that dedication, ended at a birthday party where I felt like the world's biggest idiot. I guess I should start at the beginning. When I was like 22 years old, fresh out of college, and my father, James, offered me to join his real estate company. At that moment, it seemed like the perfect decision, working in the family business, learning from the man who had built everything from scratch, eventually taking the reins and continuing the legacy. My wife, Victoria, always supported me in that. Even when it meant working until 10 at night or complete weekends, she understood that we were building our future. Or at least that's what we thought. The first few years were intense but good. My father put me to work on everything, from showing properties to negotiating contracts, handling difficult clients, solving legal problems, basically everything you needed to know to run a real estate company. He didn't give me anything for free, which honestly I respected at the time because I felt like I was earning my place. You know what I mean? I started from the bottom and worked my way up. I learned every aspect of the business, and over time I became his right hand, the person he trusted for important decisions, to close big deals, to keep clients happy. The company grew tremendously during those years. We doubled our revenue, expanded to 3 new cities, hired like 30 more employees, and I was there every step of the way, working alongside my father, thinking that someday all this would be mine, that it was my reward for dedication and sacrifice. My sister Barbara also worked in the company, but more in the administrative area, account management and those things. And her son Derek, my nephew, was a kid who honestly never showed much interest in the business. Derek graduated from college like 3 years ago with a degree in marketing or something like that, worked a couple years at random companies, and then my father hired him at the company when he was about 20 years old. At first I thought it was fine, like, he's family, he has to learn the business too, although Derek didn't seem very enthusiastic about anything we did. He arrived late, left early, basically did the minimum effort, but well, he's young, I thought. He'll mature eventually. Melissa, Derek's mom, always defended him. When my father complained about his lack of commitment, saying things like he needed time to adjust, that it was a process, that we had to be patient with him, everything changed at my father's 60th birthday party. It was at an elegant venue. Like 100 people. Came, clients, employees, family, friends, everyone important in my father's life was there. I had helped organize the event along with Victoria, and honestly, I thought it was going to be a special night, a beautiful celebration for the man who had built so much. My father gave a long speech thanking everyone, talking about the company, about how it had grown, about how proud he was of what we had achieved together. And then he said something that left me completely frozen. He said, "I want to take advantage of this special night to make an important announcement about the future of the company." And when he said that, I felt this excitement in my chest because I thought, this is the moment. He's going to announce that I'll be the next CEO, that finally, after 12 years, all my work is paying off. But no. Instead, my father said he had decided that Derek, my two-year-old nephew, who had barely been at the company for like 2 years, would be the next CEO. He said that Derek represented fresh blood, fresh ideas, the new generation that would take the company into the future. I remember standing there with a glass of wine in my hand while everyone applauded, and the only thing I thought was, is this really happening? Victoria squeezed my arm. I could feel she was as shocked as I was, but I couldn't even move. I couldn't even process what I had just heard. Derek was there at the front next to my father, smiling like he had just won the lottery, and my sister Melissa was crying with happiness, hugging him, and Barbara was looking at me from the other side of the room with an expression I couldn't interpret at that moment. I waited until the party was over, until everyone left, and then I confronted my father privately. I said, "Dad, what did you just do?" 12 years I've worked at this company. 12 years of my life. I built this with you. And you hand over the CEO position to Derek, who barely knows how the business works. My father got super defensive, told me that Derek was family, that he had potential, that I didn't understand his vision. I asked him, "And what am I? Am I not family?" And he told me something I'll never forget. He said, "Christopher, you'll always have a place in the company. You'll continue being my right hand. But I need Derek to learn by leading. It's my way of ensuring that the company stays in the family for generations." I told him that made no sense whatsoever, that he was making a huge mistake, that Derek wasn't even remotely ready for that level of responsibility. But my father had already made his decision, and nothing I said was going to change it. That night, Victoria and I stayed up until 4 in the morning talking. She was furious, more furious than me even, saying that my father had betrayed me, that he had used me all these years and now was discarding me as if I was worth nothing. But she also told me something that at that moment I didn't want to hear. She told me that maybe this was a blessing in disguise, that maybe it was time to do something for myself, to stop building my father's dream and start building mine. I was still too shocked to consider that seriously, but her words kept spinning in my head during the following days. The week after the announcement was horrible. Derek started acting like he was already the CEO, even though technically my father was still in charge. He entered important meetings, gave opinions about things he didn't understand, basically tried to prove he deserved the position. Employees looked at me with pity. Some asked me privately what was going to happen, if I was going to stay. And honestly, I didn't know what to tell them. My father called me to his office like 5 days later and told me he needed me to support Derek in his transition, to teach him everything I knew, to prepare him for when he officially took the CEO position in 6 months. And that's when something in me broke. I said, "Dad, do you really expect me to train the person who took what belonged to me?" He got angry, told me I was being immature, that this wasn't about me but about what was best for the company, and I simply stood up and walked out of his office. That afternoon I came home and told Victoria I was going to resign. She hugged me and told me she was proud of me, that it was the right decision, that I was worth so much more than this. I wrote my resignation letter that night, short and professional, basically saying that after 12 years I had decided to pursue other opportunities and that my last day would be in 2 weeks. I submitted it the next day, and my father was furious. He called me to his office, yelled at me that I was being selfish, that I was failing the family. How dare I abandon the company just when Derek needed my guidance? I told him that he had made his decision and I was making mine. Barbara tried to mediate, called me several times asking me to reconsider, saying she understood my frustration but that family was more important than pride, and I told her that precisely because of that I was leaving, because apparently for my father, family meant Derek but not me. I worked my 2 weeks' notice, documenting everything I could, transferring my clients to other agents, closing pending projects, basically leaving everything in order. Because despite everything, I'm professional, and I wasn't going to leave things hanging. On the last day, several employees came to say goodbye to me, some even crying, telling me I had been the best boss they'd ever had, that the company wasn't going to be the same without me. One of the senior agents, a guy who had been at the company for like 8 years, told me privately that he was considering leaving too because he didn't trust that Derek could handle things. I didn't say anything to him at that moment because I didn't want to influence his decision, but his words stayed with me. The first few months after resigning were weird. On one hand, I felt this incredible freedom, like I no longer had to answer to my father. I no longer had to put up with Derek's stupidity. I no longer had to pretend everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. But on the other hand, there was this huge emptiness, because that job had been my identity for 12 years. It was what I did. It was who I was. You know what I mean? Victoria encouraged me to take some time, to rest, to think about what I wanted to do next. But I knew I couldn't stay still for long because I'd go crazy. So I started researching what was needed to open my own real estate company, to see what licenses I needed to renew, to look for small offices I could afford, basically to plan how to start from scratch. Meanwhile, I started getting news about what was happening at my father's company through some former colleagues who still talked to me. Apparently, Derek had started making changes almost immediately after I left. He fired 3 of the most experienced agents because, according to him, They were stuck in old methods and needed fresh blood. He literally used those words according to what I was told. He hired a bunch of young people without experience, basically his friends, and put them in important positions. He changed the entire commission system in a way that benefited new employees but hurt veterans, which obviously caused a lot of resentment. And he started making business decisions that simply made no sense, like investing in expensive properties in areas that clearly had no demand, rejecting established clients because he wanted to focus on millennials, like things that anyone with half a brain would know were bad ideas. My father apparently tried to moderate some of Derek's decisions, but Melissa constantly defended him, telling my father that he had to trust Derek, to give him space to implement his vision. That changes always caused resistance, but that in the long run everything would work out. Barbara called me like 4 months after I left and asked if I had heard what was happening at the company. I told her I had heard some things, but that honestly it wasn't my problem anymore. She sighed and told me things were bad, that several important clients had complained about the service, that the numbers were going down, that the atmosphere in the office was horrible. I asked her why she was telling me all this, and she said maybe I should consider talking to Dad, maybe help fix things. And I told her, Barbara, I resigned. Dad chose Derek over me. This is what he wanted. Now he has to live with the consequences. At around 6 months, things got really ugly. Derek, in his brilliant infinite wisdom, decided that to impress some important potential clients, he was going to falsify some financial documents to make the company seem more profitable than it really was. I don't know exactly how he thought he was going to get away with it, but obviously the clients discovered the fraud, and not only did they leave, but they threatened to sue the company. The news spread like wildfire. Other clients started doubting the company's integrity. Employees started resigning because they didn't want to be associated with that type of practice, and basically the reputation my father had built over 30 years went down the drain in a matter of weeks. It was at that point that my parents showed up at my house unannounced on a Sunday morning. Victoria opened the door and there they were. My father looked like he had aged 10 years. My mother Barbara had red eyes from crying so much. Victoria let them in, but I stayed in the kitchen finishing my coffee, taking my time before going to the living room. When I finally entered, my father started talking immediately, saying, Christopher, we need your help. The company is in serious trouble. Derek made some mistakes, but nothing that can't be fixed if you come back. I asked him what kind of mistakes, and my mother started crying harder, saying that Derek had done things he shouldn't have, that there were clients threatening lawsuits, that employees were leaving, that they were losing money every month. My father begged me, literally begged me, to return to the company, to take control, to fix the mess Derek had caused. He said it had been a mistake not to make me CEO from the beginning, that he was sorry, that he needed me to save him. And I just sat there looking at him, feeling absolutely nothing. No satisfaction from seeing him admit he was wrong. No sadness from seeing him so desperate. Just this weird emptiness. I said, Dad, when I told you that you were making a mistake, you told me I didn't understand your vision. When I resigned, you told me I was failing the family. When Barbara asked me to reconsider, you told her that pride was blinding me, and now you come to my house asking me to fix the mess you created. My mother said, but you're our son. It's your family. You have to help us. And Victoria, who had been quiet until that moment, said, with all due respect, Barbara, Christopher dedicated 12 years to that company and you treated him like he was worth nothing. You can't expect him to come running back now that things went wrong. My father got angry, told Victoria that she didn't understand how family businesses worked, that this wasn't her business, and I stood up and told him to stop right there, that Victoria was my wife and had every right to have an opinion, and that in fact she had been the only person who had been on my side when he decided to destroy my career. I told him my answer was no, that I wasn't going to come back, that it wasn't my problem anymore, that he had chosen Derek and now he had to live with that decision. My parents left devastated, my mother crying even harder, my father with an expression of total disbelief, like he couldn't believe I was really refusing to help them. That same week, I made the final decision to open my own company. I found a small but decent office downtown, got the necessary permits, designed a logo, hired an accountant, basically did everything I needed to start legally. Victoria invested some of her savings in the business. which meant the world to me because it showed she really believed in what I was doing. The first few months were difficult, obviously. I was competing against established companies without having a client base, but I knew the business better than anyone and was willing to work twice as hard to get ahead. And then something incredible started happening. Clients I had worked with at my father's company started contacting me, saying they had heard I had my own company now and wanted to work with me. I didn't seek them out. They found me. Because apparently, the quality of service at my father's company had fallen so much that people were desperate for alternatives. Some of the agents who had worked with me also contacted me asking if I was hiring, saying they couldn't stand working under Derek anymore, that the company was sinking and they wanted to get out before it was too late. I hired 3 of them, people I trusted, who I knew were good at their job, and basically we formed a small but solid team. Within 6 months, my company was growing faster than I had imagined. We closed several important deals, got corporate clients looking to manage multiple properties. Basically, we were doing exactly what I had done at my father's company, but better. Because now I had total control and could make decisions without having to report to anyone. My father's company, on the other hand, kept falling in a nosedive. They lost like 40% of their clients in less than a year. More employees resigned or were fired. They had to close 2 of the 3 offices they had expanded during my time there. Basically, everything we had built was crumbling. Then came the most ridiculous moment of this whole story. Melissa, my father's sister and Derek's mom, sent me a letter from a lawyer accusing me of stealing clients and employees from the family business, saying I had violated some kind of non-compete agreement I supposedly signed when I started working there 12 years ago. The thing is, I never signed any such agreement. My father never asked me to sign anything because at that time he trusted me completely, so the legal threat was completely empty. My lawyer responded to them, basically telling them they had no case, that clients and employees had come to me of their own free will, that I hadn't violated any law or contract, and that if they wanted to take this to court, we'd be happy to defend ourselves and probably countersue for harassment. My parents showed up at my new office like 2 weeks after that. They entered without an appointment, which was super awkward because I was in the middle of a meeting with a client, but I had them come into my private office. My father looked around, saw the pictures on the wall, the certificates, the new desk, and said something like, "I see you're doing well," with a tone I couldn't tell if it was admiration or resentment or both. I told him yes, that I was doing well, that it turns out when you do your job well, clients stay with you regardless of what name your company has. My mother, Barbara, begged me again to come back, saying that family should be together, that this business of having separate companies was absurd, that we could merge the companies and work together. I said, "Mom, you had the opportunity to work with me as partners, but you chose to put me under Derek. You chose to treat me as if my experience and dedication were worth nothing. And now that it's clear you were wrong, you want me to come back as if nothing had happened? But it doesn't work that way." My father finally exploded, yelled at me that I was destroying the family business on purpose, that I had stolen his clients and employees, that I was a traitor. And I stood up and told him to leave my office immediately, that this was my property, and he had no right to come here and yell at me. Victoria, who was at the reception, heard the yelling and came in, stood next to me, and basically told my parents to leave or we'd call security. They left. My father still yelling things down the hallway, and honestly it was the last time I saw them in person. The following months were a mix of incredible growth for my company and total collapse for my father's company. I heard through mutual contacts that they had to sell the office building my father had bought like 15 years ago because they couldn't pay the mortgage, that Derek finally resigned, or was forced to resign, after my father finally accepted. It had been a terrible mistake to make him CEO, that they're operating with a minimal team from a small co-working space, basically barely surviving. My father sent me an email like 3 months ago. A long email where he admitted he had made the biggest mistake of his life by choosing Derek over me, that he understood why I was angry, that he hoped someday we could reconcile as father and son, even if we no longer worked together. I read the email 3 times, and honestly, I felt nothing. I didn't feel satisfaction from seeing him admit I was right. I didn't feel sadness about the broken relationship. I didn't feel like forgiving him or seeking reconciliation. I simply closed the email and went on with my day. Victoria asked me if I was going to respond, and I told her no, that there was nothing to say, that I had already turned that page of my life. She hugged me and told me she was proud of how I had handled everything, of how I had turned what seemed like the end of my career into the beginning of something better. Today, my company has 15 employees, a client list that keeps growing, and a solid reputation in the industry. I work fewer hours than I worked at my father's company, but I make more money. I have total control over decisions, and above all, I have peace of mind knowing I'm building something that is truly mine. I don't see my extended family. I basically cut contact with everyone except for a distant cousin who was always cool with me. My parents tried to contact me on my birthday last month, but I didn't respond. And honestly, I don't know if I ever will. Part of me understands that my father is an older man who made a huge mistake and probably regrets it every day, but another part of me simply can't forgive how he treated me, how he discarded 12 years of my life, as if they meant nothing. Victoria asked me recently if I regretted how I handled everything, if I would have done anything differently. I told her the only thing I regret is having waited so long to leave, that I should have started my own company years earlier instead of wasting so much time building someone else's dream. She smiled and told me that meant I had learned the right lesson. I guess so. I guess in the end, this whole mess taught me that your value isn't determined by how willing your family is to recognize you, but by how willing you are to recognize yourself. And now when I wake up every morning and go to my office, I see my name on the door and I know that everything inside is the result of my own effort, not of fulfilling someone else's expectations or waiting for someone to finally give me what I deserve. Last week, one of my biggest clients asked me if I would ever consider expanding to other cities, and honestly, the idea excites me. 2 years ago, I was begging my father to recognize me, to give me a chance to prove what I could do. And today I'm here building something that could eventually be bigger than what he ever achieved. I'm not doing it for revenge or to prove anything to him. I'm doing it because I finally understood that the only person I need to prove something to is myself. And that, I guess, is enough.